Welcome back to the podcast, Why Are You Sober? I am Sam, the host and a sober alcoholic, been sober for over 8 years, and I am here to just share some experience, strength, and hope with everybody. I'm very excited to announce that I have some interviews lined up to do over the next few weeks, so a lot of the upcoming episodes will be interviews. Today's episode is an interview, and it is with a guy named Will, who got in touch with me on Reddit. I went out and posted a bunch of volunteer things on Reddit, just asking anybody if they wanted to come on, and I got a whole bunch of people. So I'm very excited about interviewing them, hearing their stories, and sharing their stories with you, and letting them share their experience, strength, and hope with others. We will have a host of people with different addictions, different ways that they got sober, not just through support groups, but through even their own willpower and through their own ways of doing it. And that is really important for us to get out there, is that there is no one way to get sober. There is not one. There are many. And I definitely support that. And I love to support people who have never come on and share their stories, who are doing that because they've never been to a support group and they've never done that before. I love those stories. So if you want to get in touch with me, I can be gotten in touch with. I'm working on getting my website back up. I'm working on getting my my previous email working again. But for now, I can be gotten in touch with at asonofrecovery@gmail.com. That is asonofrecovery@gmail.com. I also have a Facebook page for Why Are You Sober? I have a Instagram page for Why Are You Sober? You can get in touch with me there. You can also get in touch with me on Reddit. I have a subreddit for Why Are You Sober? And you can also comment and leave messages on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. I would love that. I hope that you all are doing well wherever you are. We are currently, where I live, in a winter wonderland. It is wonderful, but schools have been closed or doing remote learning. I also have family that's actually out in dealing with the California wildfires. So I know that there's a lot of stuff going on all over the world. So wherever you are, I hope you are doing okay and are at peace. But I'm really excited about sharing Will's story. Okay, so let's go off with the serenity prayer. Good and gracious friend, grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Amen. Well, I mean, I just want to say thank you for coming on and being willing to do this. And I really appreciate it, man. So let's start with, what is your primary addiction?
Alcohol.
Okay. And that's what brought you into recovery, was alcohol.
Yeah. I'd been, I don't know how, I'm not sure how deep you want me to get.
You can get can get as deep as you want, man. Yeah.
Well, it was kind of like a little 4-year stretch of just daily drinking. But, I think that, sometime in my recovery, kind of recognizing how I drank kind of alcoholically from like the first time I drank at 14 years old.
Yeah.
But it really was, it was really just mostly alcohol. There were other things, like most people that are in recovery, there were other things kind of mixed in, but really my, 98% of it was alcohol. And that's really what kind of kept me down for a long time.
Yeah, absolutely. That was me too. So take me back to childhood. Where'd you grow up? What was growing up like for you? Mom, dad, siblings, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I grew up in a suburb of Dallas, just about 20 minutes north of Dallas, called Plano, Texas. And Plano is actually kind of infamous a little bit for this horrible heroin epidemic from the 90s, where one drug dealer moved into Plano and he killed 20 people and then not that long kind of time span. And Plano kind of gained national news for that. But so I grew up in Plano, and I was I have both parents that are still together. They just recently celebrated their 40th anniversary, which is pretty great. And, and I grew up with 2 sisters, and really kind of just like a normal. I don't know, like, it was kind of like a normal childhood for the most part, and it wasn't anything. We didn't grow up in poverty, it wasn't anything like that. It was just kind of like a normal middle class, middle upper class, family
Yeah.
growing up,
Yeah.
in the '90s. So,
What do your parents do?
my dad, uh, my dad's worked in the golf business for 45 years. He actually just recently kind of semi-retired. He works for the PGA of America for I don't know about I don't know, almost 15 years, and so that my mom's been retired for, God, what is it? It's 2025, so
Yeah.
for a little over 20 years,
Wow.
and so she's been kind of just hanging out for
Awesome.
for 20 years. So.
Yeah. So was like, tell me about growing up. Was like religion a big thing for you? Like, was sports like what were you involved in? What were you guys
Man,
doing?
not well, both my parents are Christian. And so like I grew up in like this like very like diet Christian kind of household, and that like they said they were Christian, but they never went to church. They never tried to get me to go to church. It
Okay.
was nothing like that. And I actually, oddly enough, started going to church on my own whenever I was like 14.
Oh, wow.
14 or so. I kind of just started going on my own because like I started making friends in high school, and some of them went to church, and so it's kind of funny thing because like I'd go to church, and then like the people I'd go to church with were also the people I'd go and get drunk with. And at
Okay.
like at like 15 years old, and it was kind of like a funny dynamic because it wasn't like I went to church and I became this like ultra godly person or anything. It was, for me, it was mostly like the social aspect that I really went to church for,
Okay.
and
Yeah.
it was, I don't know, and I'm curious, was that part of your life growing up
Oh,
too,
oh
or?
yeah. My dad was a pastor, and he's been a
Hmm.
pastor my entire life, and he's actually about to retire this year. He's 70 now.
Oh
Um,
my God, yeah.
yeah. So yeah. So religion was actually a huge part of my growing up. So yeah, that was a big influence in my life. So
What I can imagine is like the kid of a pastor is probably like shoved down your throat a little bit.
It can be. I mean, I gotta say, like my dad he's done a really good job of making sure that I also have two sisters. So he did a really good job growing up of making sure that we knew that we were individual people, and that he encouraged creative thinking, and I even grew up with one of my best friends growing up. His name is Kapil. He was Indian, and I would go
Hmm.
over to his house a lot after school growing up.
Yeah.
And his mom would talk to me about the Hindu gods and all this stuff, and my dad would talk to me about it. He wasn't afraid of it. He wanted us to, explore that stuff, so that we were
Oh, well,
making.
that's good.
Yeah, he wanted us to be making decisions on our own. Of like, so if you are going to be a part of church, I want you to want to do it, not because I'm making you do it. So,
That's
so
good. That's
yeah,
good.
yeah,
Well, and one thing that I never really heard that much about until I kind of gotten into recovery, and I heard a lot from other people about like religious trauma,
hmm
and like how common that kind of is,
yeah,
and which is kind of what, like, because there's a lot, in recovery, there's kind of like a lot of, you have the spiritual aspect of it, right? And that turns a lot of people away, and from a lot of different, kind of recovery circles,
yes,
right?
yeah,
And so that wasn't something that I ever had experience in personally, just because again, my parents weren't, they weren't religious. They said they were, because my mom's Methodist, my dad's Episcopalian.
yeah.
I don't think either of them know what that means. and
Okay,
and so but and so it was never really pushed on me, but it was something that just kind of, yeah, on my own, just kind of through like social stuff, I started going. And
yeah,
it's not as big like church. Like, I couldn't tell you last time I walked into a church. It's probably, well, walked into a church service, I
yeah.
guess. But it's probably been, God, I'm 34, and it's probably been maybe 12 years since I've gone to like a church service
Yeah. Wow.
or so.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, but now, it's definitely, I guess in a way, like, I am kind of like that same diet Christian in a way that I talk about, but I do have like this really strong connection with, you know, with God, of
Yeah.
like, for me, and it just so happens to be a Christian God. And,
Yeah.
and that's, that's kind of like my experience with like religion.
Yeah. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, I definitely did suffer from religious trauma, but that was mostly because I grew up in the 80s. I was born in 81, and so in the 80s and 90s, and I'm gay, and so coming out was a very traumatic experience for me,
Yeah.
especially with the church. So
Oh yeah.
that was a lot of stuff for me. But
Hmm.
um but why, so you started going just for social reasons, but then why did you also start drinking at 14? Like what drew you to go that route?
Man, and it wasn't. Well, I guess there's kind of, I think there's a lot of things. Like, I think that like one thing that I like to always kind of disclaim whenever it kind of comes to my experience is that, like, I don't think anything drove me to necessarily drink, and nothing caused me to become an alcoholic, right? Like nothing, nothing about my upbringing, nothing caused me. The only thing is that I just happened to react differently to alcohol,
Yeah.
and than normal people.
Okay.
And I think that that's like a really important thing, because there are a lot of people that have had similar experiences to me, and really, I guess you'd probably say most people that have had similar experiences to me as me don't become alcoholics. And so,
Yeah.
nothing necessarily drove me. No one thing drove me to start drinking, and no one thing caused me to become an alcoholic either. and
Yeah.
and really, I think there was no plan behind it. But I grew up in a family with a lot of drinking.
Okay.
And I guess you could probably, at least at the time, I wouldn't say as much anymore, but I think my parents would probably be characterized at the time growing up as like hard drinkers,
Yeah.
right? And so I grew up with a lot of it, and so it was always kind of there. It was always on my mind. Like, I don't know if you had this experience, but I don't know. I'd be like 5, 6, 7 years old. My dad would let me have a sip of his margarita or of his
Yeah.
of his beer or whatever, and but the first time that I really drank, really, I just called a friend of mine and I was like, "Hey, what are you doing?" And he goes, "Oh, we're about to bust open the beer." And dude, like nothing, like I just hung up the phone and ran to his house. And he lived like a mile away, and I just
Wow.
ran to his house.
Wow. That's
And
crazy.
and we just started drinking, and there was no plan. There was no, I never, the opportunity had never been there to drink like that. Then the first moment that opportunity was there, I just jumped on it.
Yeah.
And there was nothing predetermined. There was nothing that, like, I can't wait to start drinking, I can't wait till somebody asks me to drink, or it was nothing like that. It was just, it was there, and I started doing it. And
Yeah.
it was kind of that, it was kind of that simple.
So you were 14, you started drinking, just like you were just like, yeah, let's just do this. Like,
Yeah.
this just sounds fun. So how,
Yeah.
and that's, I mean, that is kind of a normal response for a lot of, of young people. Just like, this sounds cool. Like, all the adults do it. I know, but, and they all have fun with it. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I grew up seeing, a bunch of people drinking and
yeah.
stuff, and so it kind of seemed like it's my time to shine kind of thing. And like, it's funny.
Yeah. And so then you just continued like just drinking regularly through high school and
Well, and you know what? Like the first time that I drank, I didn't have like, I don't know, like I didn't have like a big like aha kind of moment my first time I drank. I actually like didn't really like it that much. And I didn't get drunk either.
yeah.
And so Though I remember the second time I drank, which was, I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 months later. The second time I drank was a different story. And that was the second time I drank. I was, I think even for an adult, like me at 15, I was like 115 pounds. I was a really scrawny kid, but man, the amount of shots that I was putting down and all that stuff, like even for an adult, I think it'd be considered, like excess. And much less for like 115 pound 15-year-old. But
Yeah.
that was the first time I got drunk. And dude, like, it was the first time because one thing I didn't mention before is that I grew up with like a lot of violence in my household, and from
Mm.
my parents and with me. And then I'd go to
Wow.
school and I'd get bullied at school. And so it was just kind of like, it started right around, I don't know, the first time I could think about, at least with me, was in middle school, was like sixth grade. So I was about like 11 years old whenever a lot of that stuff started.
The
And at
bullying and
least,
the violence.
yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Well, and I remember seeing violence in my house whenever I was younger, and
I mean, and just for clarification, like, what do you mean by violence in your house?
well, Um, I think that the earliest that I could think was like a whole lot of like verbal stuff, but then also one of the earlier memories that I have, I know I was like 5 years old, and seeing my mom choking my oldest sister, like slamming her against the wall by her neck and choking her. and
Wow.
and and my oldest sister's 12 years older than me, and so I'm 34. I was born in 1990. And she's 12 years older than me, so she would have been 17 at the time. and
Okay.
and and so, as I got older, it kind of, it started moving towards me, and my other sister, who's 2 years older than me. And so, it was typically my dad, would be, would hit me, and my mom would hit my sister. It's just kind of like how it worked for the most part. Sometimes there was some crossover, but for the most part, and it wasn't just spanking. I mean, I'd get punched in the face. I'd get thrown across the room.
Wow.
Again, I was a small kid,
Yeah.
and there wasn't anything I could do. And so, I mean, to give, to be fair, me and my other sister were not the easiest growing up. We were not the easiest kids.
Yeah, but
And
still, I mean,
yeah. I mean, it was very much like it was very much a violent household to grow up in. And it was hard being 11 years old and getting the shit being out of me at school. I don't know if I can cuss. Is
yeah,
this
no, you're
okay?
fine. You're good,
Okay,
man.
yeah.
Yeah, you're
and
fine.
and getting the shit being out of me at school, and then coming home getting the shit being out of me at home.
Yeah.
It was hard. And so the first time that I got drunk was the first time I could turn my brain off. And
Yeah.
because for a long time, I was a very, very, very self-deprecating kid. At 11, 12, 13 years old, I was very sad for a very long time. And I didn't know what it felt like to feel good about myself. I didn't know like what confidence was from like a personal standpoint. I knew the definition of confidence, but I didn't know what it really meant to like have it.
Yeah.
And I was always worried about like what people were thinking about me. I was always worried about what was going to happen to me. But man, the first time I got drunk at 15 was the first time I got to turn my brain off, and I
Mm.
didn't care for the first time in my life.
Yeah. And
And
that felt
I could
good.
act. Yeah, it felt so good.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I got to do stupid shit and not care. I would take my clothes off and like made out with my best friend's ex-girlfriend, and like, all
Yeah.
this stuff that like dumb 15-year-olds do. But man, it was a relieving experience. And I think that through the 9 years following, I think that every single time I drank was to kind of chase that same feeling of not caring.
Exactly.
and and that's really how I drank for the entirety of my drinking career,
Mm-hmm.
and and so I drank as much as like a 15, 16, 17 year old could, through high school. And because whenever I got into high school, I finally started making friends, because I didn't really have any friends in middle school. I had some in elementary school, but I started making friends in high school. And so I drank as much as I could, which really wasn't that often.
Yeah.
And and then I started smoking weed a little bit in high school, in like junior year of high school. And I didn't really like weed that much, because it just kind of made me fall asleep. And that's not what I wanted to do. I wanted to stay up and make bad decisions. And, that's the kind of stuff I wanted to do. And weed, I was too pretentious to do cocaine.
Yeah.
Like I thought I was too good to do real drugs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And like, and so I just stayed away from weed. I just, it was all alcohol,
Yeah.
through high school. And but really wasn't that much. I'd say I probably drank as much as like a normal partying high school kid would.
Yeah.
But I kind of, at the same time, in the back of my head, I was like, I want to do this all the
As
fucking
much as
time,
I can.
as much as I
Yeah.
can, which really wasn't. I couldn't do it very often,
Yeah.
which was a problem. And
So did you go to college?
yeah,
And
so that, once I got out of high school and I went to college, that was where I could go, because in high school I maybe drank 3 or 4 times a month, but in college I could drink 3 or 4 times a week. And so I went to college. I was in college for, I don't know, a year and a half or so. And I remember talking to my roommates while I was in college, and because we had some mutual friends that had, they were taking a break from college for a little bit. And I remember one of them saying, "Yeah, dude, they're back home drinking every day." And I was sitting there like, "Man, that sounds awesome. I wish I could do that. I wish I could drink every day." And but I couldn't. I was a broke college kid selling his plasma to pay for beer and
mm,
stuff like that. I don't know if you ever did that.
no, I
If you're,
didn't. I
if you're,
didn't get. I didn't get there. I definitely. I mean, trust me. I definitely went to the end of the earth to get alcohol. There was definitely like I definitely pushed myself to get it when I wanted it.
yeah.
Yeah. So, but
Well, it
yeah,
was funny because you had these little plasma centers,
yeah,
not to like teach anybody how to get extra cash for alcohol, but they had these little plasma centers where you go and you'd sit in a chair for a couple hours and it'd give you $40,
yeah,
and that was it. And so that'd fuel me, for a little bit of time. Alcohol was a lot cheaper back in 2008, 2009,
yeah,
and than it is now, which I guess I don't really know what it costs anymore. But you can go and get like a 30 rack a Keystone Light for $18 or whatever it was. And so yeah, getting $40 once a week or so was, an extra $40 was awesome.
yeah. Oh, absolutely. That's not. Yeah. I mean, of course it would be, especially in
Yeah.
college.
Yeah. Yeah.
So did the violence at home like continue through high school? Like, did it, or like when did it stop? Like, when did?
Not no, it really because it started. I mean, I don't know. I can't think about the time that it started with me. I couldn't think about a time. I think most of what I remember was from middle school, but I'm pretty sure it started before then. But no, because like my dad, like, because me, I am a 6'2", like 185-pound man,
Yeah.
but I was very much like a late bloomer. Like I didn't hit 5 foot until I was like 14, and so I remember the violence stopped, I think, right around the time, I think I was 15 or 16, because by that time I was bigger than my dad. And because my dad's a small guy, he's like 5'8". And um,
Oh
and
wow, 6'2"
so
and 5'8" is very different.
I know, I know. Yeah, there's this running joke in my family that I'm adopted, and
Yeah.
like, and so,
Oh, I am
and
also
so,
the tallest person in my family. My dad is 5'10" and my mom is 5'9". My oldest sister is 5'6". My younger sister is No, my younger sister 5'6", and my oldest sister's 5'4". Like, and I'm six
Oh
one.
yeah.
So like,
Oh yeah.
just like
Yeah. So
tower.
you know.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know. Yeah. Well, it's funny because my dad's 5'8", my mom's 5'1", and then
Oh
there's
my
me.
god. Yeah.
Yeah, but really, the violence stopped whenever I finally stood up to my dad,
Yeah.
and I don't. I was 15 or 16, and I know that he was getting my face and he was pushing me, and then finally I got up and I got in his face, and I didn't hit him, I didn't do anything like that, but I remember seeing this look on his face where I think that he realized he couldn't do it anymore.
Yeah.
And that's what I wanted.
Now,
And I didn't want to hit my dad. I didn't want it to do. I didn't want to do any of that. But um, what I wanted was for him to stop.
yeah.
And so getting up and getting in his face, and that was enough. And that's where it stopped.
Yeah.
And he never touched me again.
Now, did they drink a lot? You said that there was alcohol around a lot. Did they drink?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, my parents were hard drinkers, and
Yeah.
there was a decent amount. I think a decent amount of it, was from whenever they'd get home
Oh, yeah.
drunk, and I think that that's kind of where like a decent amount of it was. I mean, I'll say though that my dad didn't need to be drunk for me to piss him off, and but it definitely helped, and and kind of like I said, I won the easiest growing up, and and it's not to make excuses for my parents.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's definitely not making excuses for that. But I think that the like one thing that recovery gave me was like this understanding of just like this understanding of people that aren't me, and
Mhm.
one thing I learned like later on into my recovery, was that my dad grew up in an abusive household,
Yeah.
and it was not a physically abusive household, but it was a very verbally, and so like his mom was very verbally abusive towards him, and so like my dad did not grow up with like these coping mechanisms to deal with like these kind of out of control kids.
Oh, well,
and
yeah, absolutely.
and
Like, there's no
and
question
so
about
that's
that.
like, and that makes it easier for me is like, now, a 20 or a 34-year-old, adult that like, of understanding, and being able to like forgive my dad for that, because,
Yeah.
I have a choice. I could be mad at my dad for the rest of his life and or the rest of my life. I could do that. I could be angry if I want to. But like, is that the kind of life that I want to live?
Yeah.
And it's not.
Yeah.
And what I want to be is I want to be a good son, and I want to be a good brother, and I want to be a good friend, I want to be a good cousin, I want to be a good nephew. I want to be all those things, and I can't do that if I'm angry.
No.
And so having that understanding of that, like, my parents were doing the best that they could with what they knew, helps me out a lot with that. And so like I don't resent my dad for it anymore.
Yeah.
And I don't resent my mom for it anymore, because like my other sisters got it too.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't just me, we all dealt with it. And it makes it a lot easier with that understanding that like, hey, they were just doing the best that they could,
With
again,
what they were given. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah. And so again, it's not excusing the behavior, but if I want to live like a happy, useful life to my family,
Uh-huh.
then that's the kind of perspective that helps me out a lot in being able to do that.
I mean, what you are saying reminds me of this wonderful saying friends always remind me of, which is, you can't be resentful if you are being grateful. You can't, yes, the humans can experience multitude of emotions at any time, but
Mhm.
it is impossible to be grateful when you are being resentful. And it's impossible to be resentful when you're being grateful. And so that's really what I'm hearing from you, is that you've gained that perspective on life of like, that's where you want to be. Like
The old attitude of gratitude.
Yep. Exactly. So then you go through college drinking. Why did you stop? What brought you to be like, you know what, I need to stop doing this?
Well, and you know what? So I ended up dropping out of college, and I went into the Air Force, and I was in the Air Force for a little bit. I wasn't in for very long, and while I was in, some like medical things were discovered that resulted in a discharge, in a medical discharge that I kind of wanted, but I kind of didn't want, and and so whenever I got out in I guess the summer of 2011, that's where, no, spring of 2011, that's where a lot of my hard drinking really started. And, um, and man, I didn't really know what else to do. So I just started drinking. And man, like throughout, those following few years, man, there were, I'd gotten arrested at one point. I was drunk, sitting on the edge of my bed, put a gun in my head, burning
Mm.
relationships with friends and hurting people and using people. And because like, that same feeling, that feeling I talked about earlier where I just didn't know what it felt like to feel good about myself.
Yeah.
And like that was still there at 21 years old.
Mm.
That same feeling that I had at 11 was still there at 21.
Yeah.
And so I did everything that I could to feel better about myself, or to try and feel good, or try, or whatever it was, to just like try and mask all of that.
Yeah.
And alcohol was the main thing that did all that for me. And but if it wasn't alcohol, it was women,
Mm.
and
Hmm.
I loved using women to feel better about
Oh,
myself.
of
I
course. Yeah.
loved it, and I hurt a lot of them in the process.
Yeah. I mean, sex is a very easy way to make yourself feel better, like very
Hmm.
quickly. So,
Yeah.
all of a sudden
Well,
you've had this like a euphoric experience and you're like, I feel awesome right now. Like,
yeah, yeah. That's why sex addiction is a thing.
oh yeah. And
And
also
it's.
feeling that you are desired, that somebody wants you, that you are,
Hmm.
it's all very, very ego driven. So,
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And whatever I could do, and whether it was alcohol or women or God, man, like the retail therapy was a thing
oh,
too.
100%.
By the time that I, like finally got a job and stuff like that after, farting around for a while. But, it just, it was 4 years of that, and, cause whenever a lot of it started, I was just 20 years old. Whenever a lot of the hard drinking really started, I was just 20 years old. And it went on for almost exactly 4 years. And, really like by the end of it, I was just tired, like because through those 4 years, I had tried to slow down on my own. I had tried. I had like, I'm only going to drink on weekends. I'm not going to drink liquor anymore. I'm not going to drink alone.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do all.
I love reading the AA Big Book and reading all those stories because I'm just like, yep, that was me. Yep, that was me.
Yeah,
Yep,
yeah.
I tried all those things too. Not just on the weekends. No more liquor, only beer and wine. No more like
Yep.
all that crap. Yeah.
Yep. Don't go to work drunk, and like, don't drink at work, and,
Oh yeah.
stuff like that. It's just, I tried to do all those things, and it may have worked for like a couple weeks, but man, it, it, it was just a matter of time until it went back to my default. And my default is getting drunk every day. That's what
Yeah.
my default is.
Oh yeah.
And
Oh,
if
100%.
if I had alcohol in my life, that it's gonna get back to that at some point.
Oh,
And
not
and
at some point. If I bring my alcohol back to my life, it's going to be at that point tomorrow.
yeah,
Like,
well,
like,
yeah, yeah, I'm with you. And and I think about that, that like, if that ever was to happen again, it would not be a gradual thing. I would just be diving straight into the deep end,
yeah,
like, just straight into the deep end. And that's but especially at the time, but at the time though, it was, if I was drinking at all, it was just a matter of time until I was getting drunk again every day,
yeah.
which, And I'd wake up and I'd say I wasn't going to drink that day. Then 5 or 6 o'clock would roll around and I'd get drunk.
Oh yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I'd start getting uncomfortable. I'd start not liking the feelings that I was feeling that day, or I'd make up some stupid excuse or, whatever. And, I don't know, like I'd never really needed an excuse, but I like loved making excuses,
Oh yeah.
you know,
Oh yeah.
loved it,
Oh yeah.
loved it.
So you get sober, and how
hmm
does your family react to that?
Well, and you know what? So I got sober March 15th of 2015. And I was 24 when I got sober. And because like for a long time I had kind of people telling me, I don't know why so many people were telling me this, but I had so many people telling me I was just young and having fun. And but I kept a lot of my drinking kind of secret. And so I would drink before I go to things, and then I would drink while I was there, and then I'd go home and I would drink until I could fall asleep. And that's what I did. So like people never really saw how much I was drinking every day. And like, as like one of those books you were talking about says, like I'd like gathered like a host of fair weather friends, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so like I'd hang out with different people every night. And so like no single group of people knew how much I was drinking.
Yeah.
And so I'd very much like manufactured this. And so whenever whenever I was just like, because what like got me to get sober was that I was, like I said before, I was tired and I didn't know what else to do because like my way wasn't working. And no, anytime that I tried doing it myself, it never worked. And
Yeah.
so I thought I would try somebody else's way. And so whenever I got like a little bit of time, like, what I mean by a little bit of time is like a couple weeks. And, whenever I'd gotten a little bit of time and I kind of started telling my family, they were confused. And,
I bet they were.
and, and they were confused because they never saw all of it. They never, because I made sure that they didn't. And so it's funny because like I oddly enough, I'd heard this term on another podcast, like probably 7 years ago, that there was this like reverse intervention that was being had whenever I was telling my family that I was getting sober, and they were trying to convince me that I didn't need to get sober.
Yeah. That's hilarious.
And so it's like I was intervening on them, telling them that I needed to get sober. and so like that term reverse intervention like really resonated with me.
Yeah.
And but it was kind of like that perspective because like I'd said before, I cared a lot about what people thought of me, and I did not want anybody to know how much I would, that I had an alcohol problem. And so I made sure I did everything I could to make sure that nobody knew.
Yeah. And,
And
I have a lot of respect for you because the way you talk about your family, you do not claim that any of them have a drinking problem.
oh yeah, well, I mean, it's because it's not up to me.
Exactly.
You
I
know,
love that.
it's all I do is focus on my own.
Yeah. You just say,
And
listen, they drink a lot, and I know that. So,
yeah, yeah.
yeah.
And I'll say though that like at least quantity wise, like my parents are not the same now as they were 20 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so which I think is kind of like is what separates the hard drinkers from like the alcoholics,
Yeah.
and or somebody that struggles with substance abuse disorder, and that's like what kind of separates them is that they were able to just kind of gradually slow down, and there was none of that was happening for me,
Yeah.
and even at
Yeah.
such a young age.
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
know
But I often tell people that I am the first person in my family, in any generation of my family, to actually get sober and stay sober.
yeah
And
yeah
and
do,
I feel that is what you are also experiencing in your life.
Yeah, and yeah, it's the same experience,
Yeah.
And I'm curious for you, do you have like do you have family members that you might call problem drinkers
Oh yeah.
or
Absolutely. But again, I wouldn't like put it in their face or, go claim like, hey, you need to come to a meeting or anything. I,
Yeah.
but, I definitely have family members who drink a lot. And I have had an uncle of mine passed away because of his drinking.
Oh yeah.
And he had gone to meetings. He'd actually gotten like 6 months of sobriety at some point because after he passed away, we found chips. So
Yeah.
he had achieved 6 months at some point, which
Yeah.
is awesome. And I found his big book with his name of his sponsor, all sorts of stuff. So I know he tried. He definitely tried, but
Hmm.
he just he it just couldn't do it.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's why I'm like, I know that there are people in my family who have tried, and there are people in my family who just are living their lives. But I am the first one who has gotten sober and has stayed sober. So
Good for you.
yeah, and good for
How
you.
does that feel?
I mean, it feels lucky. It also feels a little like, it does feel a little weight in it. Um, there are definitely times where I have been, in a meeting or just in a group of people sharing, and I think about my uncle, and
Hmm.
part of me is like, dude, don't worry, I got it. Like, I know you couldn't, but I did, so don't worry, you know.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
and yeah, so I think about that, like, kind of in listening to your story, is like,
Yeah.
you have this grace for people in your life where you're just like, okay, you know what? If you can't do it, I'm going to do it. And that's okay.
Yeah. Well, and as far as I know, I'm really the only one in my family that really needed to get sober. And because neither of my sisters struggle with alcohol or other substances. And my parents, I guess my parents really don't either. And I had a cousin who passed away back in 2021 of an overdose
Mm,
because of fentanyl laced ketamine. And it was one of those things that I had conversations with him, because like he knew I was sober. Because I think let's see, in 2021 I was 6 years sober, and he knew I was sober. I saw him a couple years before that, and he lived out in Georgia, and he knew I was sober. I talked to him about it a little bit. I had a feeling maybe he was dealing with, dabbling in some stuff, but and I don't really know the extent of his drug use. I think that his his situation was more that, like, he didn't know there was fentanyl in it and it
yeah.
killed him.
Yeah.
And I'm sad that, like, that's not the only case of people in my life that's happened to, and friends that are also in recovery that's happened to them and they've died, and guys that I was mentoring, through recovery. um I had a guy that I'd been mentoring for a little bit, and he took Xanax while he was stationed out in Guam, and the Xanax had fentanyl in it, and it killed him.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that was a really hard one for me, because he knew that I had gone to the Air Force, at a point in my life, and he wanted to go in the Air Force, and so I was helping him out with that. I was also trying to help him stay sober, and all that stuff, and he didn't stay sober, and he died, and that
Yeah.
sucks,
Yeah.
and but there's so many cases of that.
Yeah. I know. I remember something one of my mentors said to me regularly was like, you will walk over a lot of bodies the longer you stay alive and the longer you stay sober.
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and I mean, it's a sad reality of it. So
Well, and they say, these, recovery circles will say, that you better buy a nice suit because you're going to go to a lot of funerals.
yeah.
And there's that saying, and you know what, and they're right. It's a sad thing, they're right. And but I think at the same time, I've also gone to a lot of weddings,
Me too.
for people
Yeah.
in recovery. I've been to baby showers
Yeah.
for people in recovery. I've been, and dude, like,
Yeah.
the
I get
funerals are
some.
hard, but man,
Yeah, and some of the Christmas cards I get are from from friends of mine in recovery, and it's so fun to see their lives continuing to grow, and their kids grow, and their husbands or wives grow, and like it's so fun to
yeah,
see that too, and so yes, recovery also brings a lot of joy.
it
That is
does.
that is the truth.
Yeah.
So, Will, I'm gonna end with my big question, but why are you sober?
I'm sober because I'm I learned what it felt like to feel good about myself.
Mm,
And I learned what it felt like to be able to be useful to other people. Um I you know I get to enjoy life today, and instead of manufacturing fun, what I thought is fun, and I get to actually enjoy life, and I get to be useful to other people, and I get to help other 24-year-olds that think that they're too young to be alcoholics, like
yes,
just like I was whenever I got sober. I thought I
yes,
was too young to be an alcoholic, and I get to now help other 24-year-olds that think the same way.
yeah.
And I get to have meaningful relationships, and I get to live life on life's terms. And you know, it's not to say that like my entire almost 10 years of sobriety has been sunshine and rainbows, but you know what? I've been able to get through all of it sober, and I'm so grateful for that. And I wouldn't trade this for anything, and that's why I stay sober.
That's awesome, man. That is awesome. Well, that was Will's story. I really hope you enjoyed it. Next week, I'll start off my podcast on Tuesday with doing more reading from Living Sober. I love that book. I think it has a lot that it can give us as far as help with different ideas and ways that we can be living sober. And then next week, also next Thursday, will be Maria's story. Maria is a new friend of mine all the way from Denmark, and I can't wait to share her story. It is awesome. So I'm wishing you all peace, love, and joy, and I hope you all have a great week. Bye.